Today we got the history of Peacemaker. Dun 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 dun.
What's up, my comic comrades? Today we continue our
Suicide
series on
Squad?
characters appearing in the Suicide Squad movie by breaking down the history of Peacemaker. The movie, of course, hasn't officially released yet, but based on everything we've seen so far of John Cena's live-action version of Peacemaker, he will likely be one of the breakout characters in the film. In fact, Warner Brothers and DC have already wrapped on the first season of a Peacemaker live-action TV series for HBO Max, also written and directed by James Gunn, with John Cena reprising the role. So clearly,
Now they're on season 2.
Is going to be popular as well. I also love how much John Cena enjoys being Peacemaker and how they're using him to market the movie. Basically, every time he does promotion for the Suicide Squad,
Hey bro, he's committed, bro.
Costume. It's hilarious.
I love it.
Anyway, today we're going to take a look through the pages of DC Comics to break down Peacemaker's history before we see what James Gunn and John Cena have done with him. And for those of you wondering, we will also be giving you Bloodsport's comic book origin on Friday to go along with the official US release of the movie. So make sure to keep an eye out for that one. But before we dive into Peacemaker's history, we want to thank Keeps for sponsoring today's episode. Well, if you is why 3 guys makes it simple to talk to your hair by you plan with
History.
In Fighting 5 issue 40 in November of 1966. He was created by Joe Gill and Pat Boyette. What's crazy about Peacemaker is he wasn't originally a DC character. He originally belonged to Charlton Comics, first appearing as a backup story in Fighting 5 issue 40, as I just mentioned. The backup story became so popular, he was then given his own comic series, which lasted 5 issues. Peacemaker almost instantly became one of Charlton Comics' biggest superheroes. But like lots of comic book fans know, Charlton Comics wouldn't last long, and many of their characters were bought up by DC Comics, including the Blue Beetle, Captain Atom, Question, and of course, Peacemaker. Now being owned by DC Comics, DC would introduce Peacemaker through their story Crisis on Infinite Earths, making his DC Comics debut in Crisis on Infinite Earths issue 6 in 1985. As I'm sure many of you are aware, that Crisis on Infinite Earths was this massive event that destroyed DC's multiverse, resetting and revamping continuity for DC. One of the new changes was the addition of Charlton characters that were revealed to have existed on Earth 4. The Charlton characters, including Peacemaker, were then given slightly different new origins. And speaking of origins, it's time to talk about Peacemakers. Let's start with Peacemaker's original Charlton Comics origin, and then we'll talk about his modern origin from DC Comics. Peacemaker's real name is
never known,
Smith.
bro.
He grew up an only child, and his father was an army officer and his mother was a research scientist. Because of this, he inherited traits from both of his parents, getting his fighter pilot skills from his dad and his interest in science from his mother. When Smith was an adult, he became a pacifist diplomat who worked as a U.S. peace envoy for the Geneva Arms Conference.
So we got a whole nother version in Peacemaker.
The international madman and terrorist named Bork, who was rumored to illegally be selling weapons to other nations to instigate border wars in South America. After having a polite conversation with Bork at a dinner party, Chris realizes that diplomacy will not stop him. Smith then tells his secretary, Bork will use assassins, saboteurs, bribery, and other methods to achieve his ends. I only have adequate diplomatic and legal machinery to stop him. Later on that night at Christopher Smith's private retreat high in the Swiss Alps, as the comic says, Chris tells himself, Bork is unscrupulous. I have used every means at my disposal to foil his plans. I detest violence, but because of my inadequacy, thousands of innocent people may die. I must do what I have sworn never to do. There is no other way. As Chris heads into the great cellars, there is a thick steel door. No man except Christopher Smith has ever been in the room beyond it. Inside it, we see an arsenal of the most potent weapons ever devised by man. He has designed all of them, but as a man dedicated to peace and nonviolence, Christopher Smith has sworn never to use any of them. Let's pause right there for a second.
Our Peacemaker only has helmets, so
some of the deadliest weapons on Earth.
Yeah.
It's kind of weird, but hey, comic books. Anyway, Chris goes on to say while picking up a gun, if Bork is permitted to continue,
needed just in case, I guess,
in his senseless wars. He must be stopped. I cannot succeed with peaceful methods. I've resisted taking the step, but in this case, violence must be met with violence. Although violence is against everything I stand for, there is no other solution. And he says this as he changes into his Peacemaker costume. As we see him put on the costume, a caption in the comic says, and so, although Christopher Smith has sworn never to use these implements of violence, he reluctantly assumes the role of the Peacemaker. A role he resolves he will only take when there is no other recourse, when violence can only be stopped by violent action. And just like that, now as Peacemaker, he uses violence and brute force to stop Bork once and for all. Now that's Charlton Comics' origin.
You gotta do what you gotta do, I guess.
How DC tweaked his origin. Peacemaker was introduced into the DC universe during Crisis on Infinite Earths. He was given a new origin and name. Well, new last name, as he was now Christopher Smith. He was the only child of Wolfgang Schmidt and Elizabeth Lewis. His father was a munitions manufacturer and his mother was a children's author. However, there was one big twist in DC's origin of Peacemaker. Chris's dad was revealed to be a Nazi officer in the Nazi elite SS Corps, who was responsible for the deaths of 50,000 innocent people. Knowing Wolfgang was going to be caught and arrested, he killed himself in front of Chris on his 5th birthday. Yeah, not traumatizing at all. After this, his mother Elizabeth quickly relocated both of them and legally changed their last name to Smith so no one would associate them with Wolfgang, giving us his original Charlton Comics name, Christopher Smith. When Chris turned 18, he entered the military, which seemed good for him.
We got a whole different story, bro.
Best soldiers. Chris soon led a scouting mission to a small village that was expected of harboring enemy troops. Once there, Chris decided it would be a great idea to start opening fire upon the entire village, killing innocent women and children. Because of this, he was court-martialed and sentenced to life in prison. While in prison, Chris was offered a pardon if he joined Project Peacemaker, which was a top-secret, high-tech, independent anti-terrorist squad. Of course, he took it, but several months in, the program was shut down. Christopher was then able to walk off the base without being caught. About a year later, Chris decided to do what the Peacemaker program taught him to do, and that's fight off terrorism. So he took the Peacemaker name for himself and became the costume vigilante Peacemaker. As the vigilante Peacemaker, Chris became
mattered
more
into
and
his
more
own
violent.
hands.
He then started hearing the voice of his dead father Wolfgang and started to believe that the souls of the people that died due to terrorism lived in his helmet and were pushing him towards more violence and retribution. Basically, Chris loved peace so much he was willing to kill for it by any and all means necessary. But even more recently for Peacemaker, in the current Suicide Squad title, which is only 5 issues in at the time of shooting this video, it appears DC has gone back to Peacemaker's original Charlton Comics origin. In 2021 Suicide Squad title, issue 2 to be exact, we see Peacemaker briefly recount his origin on the first 2 pages. Peacemaker tells us as follows: Arkham Asylum, mission report, current status, FUBAR. My name is Christopher Smith. I used to be a diplomat. I came to DC in pursuit of one thing and only one thing: peace. And when I couldn't find it, my new life began. Peacemaker isn't just a name, it's my mission. Whatever it takes, whatever the cost. Waller threw me into our hellhole prison on some trumped up charges, made me the leader of the Suicide Squad. I'm grateful she has the same mission.
You didn't have a choice, bro.
Judging by Chris's
the only way out of jail.
It seems very apparent that DC has gone back to the original Charlton Comics origin for the character. We even see a picture of him in a suit on the first page, looking very reminiscent of how he looked in the Fighting 5 issue when he first was introduced, standing in front of the Capitol building. But just like that, my comic comrades, you now know Peacemaker's origin and how it's evolved over the years. So now let's move on to story arcs and publication history. Peacemaker doesn't really have that many stories in comics. He has his original 5-issue series from Charlton Comics, which essentially just follows him around the world taking down terrorists. And he uses as much violence needed to keep the peace. It's probably the most important series for the character, as it established all the core aspects of Peacemaker we know today. Then years later, Peacemaker would be acquired by DC, as I mentioned earlier, and introduced via the Crisis on Infinite Earth storyline. Although this introduced him to the DC universe, he didn't play a big role in this series at all, but we do see him fighting the Anti-Monitor's shadow demons. We would then get a 4-issue Peacemaker series in 1987, and in it, Peacemaker tracks down terrorists.
They got a lot of comics on Peacemaker, and it don't seem like it.
Peacemaker comics, his obsession with keeping the peace by any means necessary keeps growing and growing to the point where Chris's family begins to worry that the mission may cost him his sanity. This ultimately causes him to come into a confrontation with the villain, Dr. Zinzin. And while he's fighting the villain and his men, he's also fighting the ghost of his father, which still haunts him every single moment.
We got a whole different story
haunting him throughout this series. Then, of course, by the 4th and final issue, Peacemaker stops Dr. Zinzin from starting a global war while simultaneously overcoming his own demons, like his ghost father. Peacemaker would appear in other series and events here and there throughout his history, but let's skip to his most modern interpretation in 2021's Suicide Squad title. In this series, Amanda Waller has made him the leader of the Suicide Squad, where him and the rest of the squad are tasked to capture the Talon and bring him to Amanda Waller. We actually covered the first 2 issues of the Suicide Squad series, so if you want to check that out, you can do so right here. The 2021 Suicide Squad title also gives us the updated origin of Bloodsport, but like I said earlier, we'll be talking about that on Friday. Right now, it's time to take a look at Peacemaker's powers and abilities. He's just a normal human, so he doesn't have any powers like super strength, speed, flight, or anything.
He still be hanging with them, though.
He does possess the physical strength and stamina of someone who does extreme physical exercise. So John Cena was perfect casting. He's also a master of various forms of hand-to-hand combat and a very skilled gymnast. Being a highly decorated soldier, he's also an expert marksman, great pilot, and proficient in most weaponry. As for equipment, which helps him out when he's doing his vigilante thing, his costume is made of a thin body armor developed by himself. His helmet, which looks hilarious looking like a silver toilet bowl, is actually high-tech. In the comics, it's heat and pressure proof and contains sophisticated cybernetic circuitry that allows him to operate various devices, like an all-band radio, ultrasonic blaster, surveillance devices.
Yeah, he got
even a
a
laser. His right
lot
glove
of
even
different
has a tiny
helmets.
vial in it that when it's crushed, it becomes a fireball. Peacemaker also has a jetpack, which he uses quite often in the comics and was introduced to us in his first appearance at Charlton. As for his favorite weapon, that would be guns, any and all guns, and he carries his favorite one on his right side. But now that you have an overview of Peacemaker's powers and abilities, let's take a look at some reading recommendations. Check out Fighting 5 issue 40, Peacemaker's first appearance, Peacemaker's 5-issue Charlton Comics series, his 1987 4-issue series, and the newest series Peacemaker is in, the 2021 Suicide Squad title. That should be enough to get you all started.
He's fairly new.
First up for the week of the 4th, we have Justice League issue 66.
But that's
United
it for today. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.